Hi, this is no ordinary voice of spiritual ventriloquism. You are listening to Dummy himself, still dealing with this frog in the throat for the last week. Can't keep a good man down, I guess. Anyway, here I is again. I want to talk today about the idea of, or I should say the teaching of free will. And all of that term implies can't be Calvinist, obviously. How could they have a free will? They're, right from the womb, they're going one place or the other. That's why you shouldn't have foreigners teaching the people. You shouldn't have foreigners ruling over the people, even in an ecclesiastical realm, because they import a lot of their paradigms from their own cultures into the text and try to create a hybrid, which is normally unworkable and untenable when you compare it to the revealed word that has been written down. So, free will. I've always had an issue with this because the Bible tells us that we're born in sin. How free is that? Gee, thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. I'm glad your predeterministic world has worked out so well for you. For me, not so much. So, right there, right at the very beginning, because you have Adam. He was probably the one who did actually have free will. The problem with free will is other people, even God himself, can't, or at least chooses not to control it. Which presents a myriad of theological problems, especially with people that think everything's working according to some perfect, no bumps, no dips, no flat tires along the way through the last 6 millennia. It's all going according to the plan. Okay. Now that would present theological problems for another side of the construct, that God is somehow, or Yah is somehow, some absent landlord or something like that. So I don't even want to get into this thing. I just want to stick with this whole concept of free will. Adam, probably the only one who had a free will, deliberately decided to choose the wrong thing, according to the account. And since then, that transgression, that disobedience, has passed upon all men. How free is that? Again, we only have our Father to thank, at least for putting us into the position of having even less and less free will. So we started someone had a perfect free will. I can agree with that. But now it has devolved into somebody who really doesn't have any free will in your own. You're not free to will. You're being molded and shaped by your ancestors and by your upbringing and your teaching and your training. Women are the primary teachers of the home, right? A lot of this crap that's going on in the world today, directly to mama. Now, I'm not even gotten to the absentee fathers yet, or even the mother and the father who are still together but live parallel lives amongst their children and don't interact with them in their development of how they will arrive at decision-making processes, knowing that free will is a myth. There is no such thing. And that's my whole point. And I've had problems with this for years because it's so easy to pin the tail on the donkey, to say, okay, this is all on you. You will, and I understand their will is involved and it's being exercised, but it is far from free. If that's the case, then we need to scrap this whole, idea of deliverance, because there's nothing for you to be delivered from. The only thing you need to set straight is your will. And yet we find people are in some areas of their lives are either incapable or incapacitated to address such things as spirits, ghost in the shell, in the closet, or whatever. So yeah, we've to say we all have free will, that we bear the onus and the responsibility of everything, and I do agree we do. We are responsible for our actions. We do have to, well, unless you have anarchy and chaos reigning as it did in the antediluvian age or pre-diluvian age, you have to lay down some ground rules as to who's going to go to the gallows and who isn't. And why. And that's why you need judges, not theologians who like to put things in nice, tight little packages because, they really couldn't make it in the private sector. So you either default to government or you default to, being a Christian pastor and hanging a sign on the wall, Jesus on tap here. So anyway, I was reading a while back, and I've always been quite interested in cognitive sciences and psychology and things like that. I think that there is a deterministic construct and a metaphysical construct that exist and are built and work together in the universe. Okay? So I've always been interested in cognitive science, psychology, and things like that. And I will say this, that the cognitive scientists, the psychologists, do have the beast nature, the brute nature. They got that down pretty pat. You can't deny it. What they are missing is more the metaphysical realm. And what I mean by that is the spiritual dynamic or whatever. They miss out on that all too often, and they don't take that construct into consideration, and therefore they're kind of like hobbled to treat anybody for anything. But neither do I agree that it's all metaphysical and then, deliverance will solve every problem you have in life and there's nothing physically wrong with you, because that's not so either. There are things that happen in child development and the development of children's lives, things like that, that have great bearing on the decision processes, how they arrive at decision making. Early and later on in their life, they form a program, if you will, in which they make decisions based on their environment and circumstances as they developed, as their brains develop, their frontal cortex is developed throughout time, child has blunt head trauma, is not going to make the same kind of decisions as someone who didn't. A child who has been well nourished and nurtured as a child, loved and cared for by his mother and father or whatever, is going to arrive at decisions on a completely different means than someone who was in a broken household. May have been drugs involved. All environmental issues, lack of food, lack of resources, then becomes the basis. Survival becomes the decision-making motive in people's lives. And to be perfectly honest with you, deliverance is not going to work for that empirically. It's going to take a lot more understanding. That person needs to understand why he makes decisions for that reason, and hopefully he can get both deliverance for what issues he may have on the metaphysical or spiritual level, but also get the help he needs on the natural level. I've seen in the past everything being shoveled over to, there's a demon behind every bush, and an imp behind every garage door in a person's mind, and that they're responsible for everything. It's the absentee landlord thing. You know, so Yah's on vacation, God's on vacation, and hasn't changed the living conditions and stuff like that. I mean, I don't even want to go down those kinds of roads because they're utterly ridiculous. You know, but the truth of the matter is, plain and simple, we arrive at decisions based on our upbringing, lack or nurturing resources being available, trauma, physical neglect, or whatever, all play into antisocial behaviors and things of that nature. So I was actually reading a psychiatrist, or not say a psychiatrist, but a cognitive scientist by the name of Robert Sapolsky several months ago, and I wanted to do this video earlier on, but never got around to it. I got the opportunity to do it, and he's kind of saying the same thing, that free will is a myth. And I've always believed that because I don't see it in the scripture, one man's disobedience, death was passed upon every man. Well, what does death entail? It could entail violence. It could entail, screw ups. You drop the ball. Call it whatever you want. We're not in a perfect world here. But that yet, in a sense, on the metaphysical side of it, through one man's obedience, all became righteous, or those who follow after the Torah and receive the correct mark on their forehead or their right hand. So anyway, so Robert was saying that most of the decisions we make in life are based upon our upbringing and things like that. And that's where I see this, metaphysical meeting the deterministic or the physical, probable sciences and stuff like that. They kind of meet in the middle, and then, they touch each other, and they embrace each other in the center. Not necessarily that one discipline is any more valid than the other. I think they're both equally valid, and they do, or I should, or can work together. Anyway, but overall, I think free will is a myth. And I think we need to dispense with that nonsense because we cannot make Scripture, without altering Scripture, we can't make sense out of it unless we come to terms with that this world is really, really messed up. It's not Yah's fault. But neither can the pall of all the blame and stuff be passed on, and the onus of everything be passed upon a person without actually determining the circumstances around which it occurred. Does that alleviate us from guilt? Does that alleviate us from punishment? No, it can't. Otherwise, we would have chaos. So you have to have something in there to try to throttle and control things. Just my thoughts on that subject. Free will is a myth. It doesn't exist. And it isn't harmonious with Scripture. Shalom.